That's right. That's right. All right. I think we can get started. So thanks for coming to this panel about extending broadband into rural underserved areas and innovative ways of service delivery. Before we start, I'd like to try to get an idea of who's in the room, so our panelists kind of know who they're talking to. Who's with a town, municipality, county government? Okay, a couple. Who's with an anchor institution? Okay, a handful. With a provider? Okay. Anyone who hasn't raised their hand yet?
Consulting?
Public anchor institutions. That would include public libraries, schools, healthcare facilities. Okay. That covered. Anything else you guys want to know about who's in here? Towns? Are you kind of all spread throughout the state? Who's on the west side of Kansas? East? Okay. Anyone from like Wichita, Topeka? Who's from a more rural area? Okay, it's a fairly good mix. Cool. So we have three panelists today that all represent different components of sort of the broadband delivery and really how you use broadband in some of these areas. We're going to start off first with Michael Limata. You were just telling people how to pronounce your name the other day, and it threw me because I usually know how to pronounce it. I've got to check. Michael runs a nonprofit based in Kansas City that works on both sides of the state line. It's called Connecting for Good. It's come about in the last few years to really drive broadband utilization and address the top of the digital divide. So the way we'll do this, I'll have each panelist spend about 10 minutes going through their slides and their talks, and then we'll have some time for Q&A after that.
Thanks, Aaron. It's a really exciting time to be talking about broadband. It's a whole new era. And Aaron, was the host just of a national program here called the Gigabit Summit. And in the middle of it, President Obama mentioned now that the whole area of municipal broadband is about to take a whole new dimension as far as cities now being able to build their own networks. Of course, as you know, in Kansas City, Google Fiber has come to Kansas City. We're the first Google Fiber city in the nation, providing 100 times faster internet. And so Connecting for Good, my co-founder Rick Dean is with me here today. Came about actually after Google's announcement of coming to Kansas City. And we felt like now there's probably no better time to get more people using the internet. And we've been spending the last 3 years or so thinking about how do we spread broadband adoption, especially in our situation with the inner city underprivileged neighborhoods. Just as a sketch, we believe that low-income people have the most to gain from the internet. There are several things that happen in low-income families when they have access to broadband. And England has been way ahead of us, and they've done a national initiative right now to get broadband internet into every public housing project in England. So they've looked at this a lot. We know that certainly for low-income families, there's increased educational success at all levels. Kids get, assignments where they have to go online. Well, if you don't have a computer or you don't have the internet, how do you go online? Your job search and career development, access to social services and health information. And there's actually cost savings when you can shop online. You can buy diapers, for instance, cheaper online than you can at the corner bodega. There's also the thing of searching for vehicles, safe, affordable housing, connecting with family and friends. That example of military members from the reservation talking to the family back home was a really good one. And assistance to the pathway to immigration and citizenship. We know in Kansas City, Kansas, where we have our headquarters, a large percentage of those who are low income and living in public and assisted housing are recent immigrants. And for them, the internet becomes that pathway to citizenship. And as mentioned earlier, as we've been doing this for about 3 years, we've really understood that there are essentially 4 reasons why people don't get online. And our situation, of course, because we work with a lower income population, cost is a big one. But the thing that people don't understand, I think, is that cost of the equipment is probably a bigger impediment to getting online than the cost of the service. The second thing is intimidation, as the secretary just mentioned, or the not knowing how to use the computer and the internet, and not knowing where to go to get the skills. You know, if I'm a 50-year-old inner city person, never used a computer, where do I go to learn about these things? Then the third is relevance, not knowing what can be done online and how it applies to my life. Then the fourth is affordable service. You know, Kansas City, for instance, supposedly is broadband rich, but we've discovered that still even $25 a month for a year for the free Google Fiber plan is still a high bar for some people. But we also have found, and many national studies have discovered, that if you can get the computer in the home and the training and understand what you can do with the internet, most folks will find a way to get a connection. So we believe that it's those things first, and then affordable connections will make a difference. In the Metro Kansas City, you know, from the 2013 U.S. Census, it was discovered that our city of Kansas City, Kansas, is still the 7th least connected city in America. And the other cities that were less connected than Kansas City, Kansas, were border towns along Mexico, where there was a high population of immigrants and low-income people. So we have actually focused on the areas of our city where 80% of the families don't have a computer or internet connection. And at least on the Kansas City, Missouri side, and it's somewhat reflective of what's going on in the Kansas City, Kansas side, 70% of the public school kids in this basically 95% free and reduced lunch district don't have computers in their home. And they don't have an internet connection. In Kansas City, Kansas, there is actually a laptop distribution program where all the high school kids get laptops. But we know that more than half of the homes with the laptops don't have a connection. And one issue is the fact that with low-income families are very mobile. In the case of most school district, they determined that 40% of the kids will move during the school year. And another thing we know is that 78% of those who are considered low income live in rental properties and assisted living. It's mostly in multi-family type of situations. So our organization, Connecting for Good, kind of tries the four-pronged approach, which is inexpensive refurbished computer equipment, our digital life skills training, free and affordable internet connectivity, and then we're also focusing on public access, PC labs, and community technology centers. And we're really become a proponent of computer reuse rather than recycling. We know that in this country, millions of tons of computers that are perfectly usable end up in the recycling cycle. In other words, they get torn down and junked out for parts when they're still perfectly usable. So we've worked really hard to make sure that we can capture the equipment before it gets off to recycling. It's sort of like, you know, gleaning right in the fields. After the gleaners have passed over, you go back and get what useful food is there. Well, I think we need to think about gleaning for electronics too. And that's how do we make sure that what's useful gets back into the families that can use it. And so this is the Missouri side, where we did a little bit more extensive study. But since 2013, out of the stuff we've gleaned, we've produced over 2,000 refurbished computers. And most of them went to these neighborhoods, as you can see, the light areas, where only 1 in 5 households even owned a computer. And the way we do it is we sell laptop computers for $150 and refurbished desktops for $75. Especially for the $75, it's affordable. Here's a list of some of the classes that we do: email use, search engine use, learning how to get health information, government services, job applications, social networking, etc. And in 2014, we reached 2,160 students in a total of 244 sessions at 10 different sites. Probably the biggest statistics coming from this was that 25% had never used a computer before. 75% 50 years or older, 80% minority, 75% of incomes under 20,000, 2/3 women, and half of the people who came had a child in their homes. The other focus we're doing with both Kansas City, Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri is focusing on getting these community technology centers, those public access computers that people can go to. And the other thing that we've been involved with, especially in low-income housing, is what we call building wireless connectivity. This is actually a property called Juniper Gardens, which is actually the oldest and largest public housing project in the state of Kansas. And this 70 or so radios that we've put out there created a hotspot that covers over 4 city blocks and brings connectivity to approximately 300 households. We built this in 2012. And then we have another, the Community Technology Center I showed in the last slide was actually right across the street. If you can see the very top notch, the very top is a brown roof building. That is where we have our community center with a 20 computer lab and regular training sessions. And so we are focusing on giving these people the inexpensive computers and a Wi-Fi connection. Currently, our organization, through this effort, provides free internet to Section 8 public families, about 500. And as we said before, I mean, 78% of low-income people live in these things. So free internet access for them, I think, is a huge win to really invest in the lives of the people that live there. And but just the connection is not enough. Getting the free training and the devices is also essential. Thank you.
Next up, we have Allison Walsh. She is the Communications Outreach Manager with Mobile Beacon.
Hi, everyone. Has anyone heard of Mobile Beacon? Any chance?
I met a lady at the lunch line that had something to say.
Hi, I'm Allison Walsh, and I came down here to visit you all the way from Providence, Rhode Island. Mobile Beacon is a nonprofit organization, but I guess we could be considered a provider as well. But what makes us a little bit different in that we are a wireless service provider, and our goal is to work with you all, so community anchor institutions, to get your beneficiaries connected. So I'll tell you more about that. So again, even though we provide an internet service, our commitment is to digital equity. So we approach all of these issues from that mission. We're a nonprofit, as I mentioned. We're the second largest EBS provider in the United States. And does anybody know what EBS is? Spectrum. Educational Broadband Services. And so the wireless spectrum that our service runs on, our internet wireless service runs on, is dedicated just to education. So the FCC, in my opinion, did a really smart thing and reserved this highway, if you will, just for education, so the transmission of education. So that's our little niche in this big industry of the internet providers. So far, we've been in, well, I guess we started about 5 years ago. And since that time, we've donated through our donation program 10,000 devices, that would be hardware, and the Wi-Fi hotspots that we have, 2,000 laptops, it's a little bit more than that by now, and over $2 million in donations to educational and nonprofit institutions. So we don't work with individuals per se, but we work with organizations like Michael's organization and like Joe's Libraries to get internet into the hands of people that cannot afford to get internet service. I'll tell you more about that. So our mission is to connect affordably nonprofits and schools and libraries to high-speed internet broadband service. Since we don't work directly with individuals, we work a lot with partners. Here are some of our partners. So TechSoup specializes, a lot of librarians in the room will recognize TechSoup. They help support libraries and nonprofits with affordable software, hardware donations, and our 4G internet service as well. Digital Wish specializes in schools, so K through 12. They have great donation programs with hardware and software, and then also our 4G wireless service. And then we partner with Everyone On. Has anyone heard of Everyone On out of Washington, D.C., a great nonprofit organization? They work with partners all throughout the United States to get individuals access to the internet for $10 a month, and we are one of their providers. So our Internet Inclusion Initiative includes three things. As we know, that three-legged stool to get people online is access. So can they afford it? Do they find it's relevant, as Laura said earlier? Hardware, do they have some sort of device to get onto the internet? And then how do you support that? So organizations like Michael's gives the digital literacy training component that is so essential to break down that one barrier, which is relevance. And so we work with partners on all three, and we also provide donation services with all three of those. So what do? We offer 4G data plans. We're a little bit different than Internet Essentials from Comcast and some of Cox offerings and other wonderful organizations that does these programs. We don't base our eligibility on any free or reduced lunch program. If you come to us and you need the internet, we offer it to you for $10 a month. And that's unlimited data also. So we work with schools in many low-income areas that get Chromebooks, but then the kids go home and they don't have internet service at home. And so that's when we come in, and then the schools will get our devices. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This little Wi-Fi device to put in their backpack with their Chromebook, and then they get onto the internet for $10 a month. Oh, you know, I shouldn't jump over that. So that last point, sustainable platform, let me give you an example of what that means. So more and more you may have heard that we're working with libraries. The New York Public Library just put 10,000 of our devices into their circulation. So now in all 5 boroughs of New York City, low-income families can go to their local library and check out an internet hotspot for free. And the New York Public Libraries are lending these out for about 6 months to a year at a time. So that's quite remarkable. We work with very small rural libraries as well that don't have internet connections. And so they get these devices, they put it into circulation. And then we've talked to a number of them, and a lot of these patrons will borrow it time and time again because now they've just broken through that relevance barrier, right? They know how valuable it is to help their children with homework or to do their taxes or whatever it is that they're doing. And so now libraries are, after so many times the patron takes out the internet device, they're asking them to consider going to Everyone On and then pay that $10 a month themselves so that they can put this back into circulation so new people can get that. So that's a really nice program. So if a library has a finite budget to get these devices, they're able to still continue to service and support their patrons by having people eventually move over to a more sustainable platform through Everyone On. I don't work for Everyone On, but I think they're great. Okay, so how do we reach folks at home? Here's a few examples again through our partnerships. So K through 12, the one-to-one programs that I mentioned. We work with Miami-Dade right now where they have, laptops going into the kids' backpacks. They go home. Do they have an internet connection? They have about 1,000 of our devices now going home with the kids to keep that sustainable program going. I mentioned the New York Public Library, but again, we work with small libraries, we work with big libraries. Many small libraries use our devices to just get out into the community for experiential learning activities, for their mobile book labs, for special events and things like that. So I don't want everyone to think that you have to get 10,000 devices. We have a lot of libraries that have 1 or 2. Adult workforce, this is a program that's very important to me personally. We worked with the Housing Authority to get a lot of the adults who have never been on the internet before digital literacy training. We donated laptops to the program. There were 25 adults, mostly Latino women, with families who have never been on the internet. We donated 25 laptops, 6 weeks of digital literacy training, and our internet devices. And upon graduation, they got all those wonderful devices to go home after the 6 weeks of training. 2 didn't show up in the first 2 weeks. We found out later that that was because they got jobs. 2 got 25, second 2 got jobs. We work with nonprofits, so People's Emergency is a great nonprofit out of Philadelphia. They work with Philly Key Spot, which is a broadband grantee, I believe, and they work with homeless families. And so now People's Emergency is putting into circulation 200 of the mobile beacon hotspots to lend to these homeless families to help them on their digital inclusion, development, and education. Here's some examples of some other organizations that we work with. Ashley Park is a very small community in Charlotte, North Carolina, low-income families that have never been online before. Ashley Park is putting in their Digital Bridge program. They're putting our devices into that program to allow people to do their homework and do extracurricular activities at home, online, through that school. Same thing with College Unbound, and here's an example. Providence Community Library was the pioneer. They were the first small community library in the digital divide in the capital of Rhode Island to put a device into circulation for the first time in the United States. Here's that program that I talked about. We're really proud of this. This is the Housing Authority in Providence, where 25 women who've never been on before went through pretty grueling digital literacy training. It was pretty difficult. They had a great bilingual trainer. So 6 weeks after that program, they were given laptops, and very similar to what Michael has on a smaller scale. The good news is that this program is continuing after this jumpstart that all these partners that came together helped launch. Here's a quote which I'm sure we've all become familiar with in one way or another. Through a program we ran in Los Angeles. Just the fact that people no longer have to, stand in line in the queue at the library to get online or to get digital literacy training or do their homework at McDonald's or Starbucks or wherever, that the power of bringing the internet to the home really makes a huge difference in many of our customers' life. And I'll skip that because we're going to do Q&A later, right? Okay.
Thanks, Alex. Our last panelist today, I didn't even know that we had a state librarian until I was asked to moderate this panel, but for the state of Kansas, state librarian Joe Butler.
Every state has a state librarian, by the way. There are only 50 of us. But we're the best kept secret probably in the country. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a state library does, because whenever I have a chance to talk to anybody about the state library, I try to let them know. But I especially want to talk today about, there are several librarians in the audience, and libraries are all about equity of access. So I love what you guys are doing, and it's really great, but what we want to do is always make sure from the very beginning of a library, way back when it first started, we want to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to have access to things that will enhance their lives. And the internet is no different than the books that we have on the shelves, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to talk about three things: borrowing the internet in your library, which you talked about, we're doing here in Kansas; public access computers, which we don't have enough of, but we have quite a bit in our libraries; and then resources that are kind of the carrot. So when people get the internet at home, this is what they can use at no cost. All of this is at no cost. So you know this, probably if you're from Kansas, you know we're 2.7 million people. The state library has three customers, basically. We serve state government. We serve every branch of state government. We serve the librarians across the state. We try to help them to provide the best library service that they possibly can. And then we provide services to every resident in the state at no cost through our statewide resource sharing and statewide services. So databases, things like that, I'm going to talk about a little bit. You know, if you're from Kansas, that we're mostly rural, but of our 329 public libraries, I think this is really important, because when you talk about little libraries, we've got little libraries. Only 5 serve over 100,000 people. Topeka, Shawnee County's here, that's my library. But we only have 5 that big. The rest, 33, serve over 10,000, the rest are under 10,000. Those are small libraries, those are small communities, those are rural communities. That's really important for us to remember. I'm originally from New York City, so if you hear that accent, that's what it is. New York Public was not my library. I was in Queens. so we're very different. But I really appreciate Kansas for what it is. The rural aspects are something we should embrace. Schools, academics, we have a lot of academics, a little over 50. State Library serves all of these libraries because we believe that people should have access to services through any kind of library. A library is a library is a library. My husband always says that to me. He doesn't care where material comes from, and neither do any of you probably. You just want what you want when you want it. Right now, we've done 2 programs now with the borrowing the internet at your library, and one was through Mobile Beacon. We got 2. That they use Sprint for their service. So we got a bunch of those little devices, gave them to 2 libraries, Salina and Newton Public Library, and they've been lending out the internet with iPads for quite a while now, for at least 6 months, maybe a little longer than that. And we funded that with what, we get some funding from the federal government, Library Services and Technology Act money, from the Institute of Museums and Library Services, and that's how we funded that. It was really successful, and we've done a few other innovative things, and so New York Public Library president called us and asked if we were interested in doing something with them, utilizing some funding from the Knight Foundation through them, and they were looking for a rural partner. Now, I told you I'm from New York City, so why they didn't look beyond the bridge up north to the northern part of their state is beyond me, but we took advantage of it and we said yes, we would be partners with them. They're giving us a bunch of money from Knight, so we have 19 public libraries now who are using Verizon. The problem with using Mobile Beacon, which is wonderful, we love what you do, but it's Sprint, and we don't have a lot of Sprint coverage in the state, and so if you're on an on the interstate or on a big highway, it worked. But Verizon was really the one that would provide the most. So we partnered with Verizon through a state contract. We have these 19 public libraries that are going to be lending out the internet, actually are lending out the internet right now. About 70 devices. We could use double that. The devices are flying off the shelves. They're only going out for a week at a time. Unlike New York Public, we are not coupling it with education. They did it the 6-month period because they are lending it out with the iPads or the Chromebooks, I think they are using. Chromebooks to the kids. So the kids are taking it home and using the Chromebook and the device to do homework. It's coming together. We're not doing that. Ours is a little different. It's just we want to get it out there, have people get educated as to what they can use it for. We know it's not about just gaming. It's about doing your homework. It's about looking for a job. It's about getting into the databases that help you create a resume and take practice tests. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Both of the devices, no charge, and for a year we will be paying that charge for the libraries, for all 70 devices. These are the, I don't know if you can see that, I know it's small. These are the 19 libraries. They range in size, but remember, New York Public wanted us to do rural, so we just decided we would go out across the state. We've got in we have 7 regional library systems in the state, and we wanted to make sure we got some libraries, at least one, in every single one of our regionals, and I think we achieved that. I talked a little bit about public access computers, and we have 329 public libraries. We have about 3,600 public access computers. That doesn't mean that there's 10 in every library. We have some really tiny libraries that don't have more than a couple, and we have our bigger libraries that have 100. So there's quite a range. We all know what people use the internet for: entertainment, email, gaming, research, job applications, e-government. If you want to get a fishing license, you can get it online. You want to pay your taxes, you don't want to pay your taxes, but you do it online. So there's lots of reasons why people want to use that public access computer. And also, librarians are great. They really are. They just want to help people so much. They really do want to help people learn how to use the internet. And they don't ever make, I've never known a library who made anybody feel uncomfortable about a question they asked. So there's a lot of comfort in coming to the library and learning. I remember once when I first was training people how to use the internet, I had someone who picked the mouse. I said, point to this, and he actually picked the mouse up and pointed it like you would your remote. Now, you know, that was his frame of reference. He was perfectly comfortable when I said, no, and helped him to do it the way he needed to do it. But that's the sort of thing that's, people feel comfortable going to libraries because of that. The resources, I talked to you about the resources. I really want you to leave here knowing that we have these. If you go to our website, the Kansas State Library website, the State Library of Kansas, not Kansas State University, but the State Library of Kansas website, and you go under electronic resources, you will find hundreds of databases that are paid for and by us on your behalf, and they're things like Learning Express Library. And before I leave, I want you to have my card because Learning Express Library has Career and Job Center in there. It helps you to find jobs. It helps you to create your resume. It actually has some little scenarios built in that help people do their job interviews. There are over 100 practice tests in there, the ACT, Realtor's test, cosmetology, emergency training. So all of that is in there. We have ebooks, we have Mango. Has anybody heard of Mango besides the librarians? Mango is a language database. If you want to learn pirate, you can learn pirate in Mango. But it is, I'm taking an Italian course and not getting very far. Yeah, but anything you wanted, the governor wanted to learn a little bit of Spanish because of a trip he was going on, and we sent him to Mango. I think I can tell you that. It's not invading his privacy, I don't think. But anyway, that sort of thing. It's really great for things like that. Just ongoing education. Genealogy, are there any genealogists in the, okay. So there always has to be at least one. And genealogy is available, a database on genealogy is available at the library only, so that's another way that we help. Ebooks, libraries are committed to early literacy. We know that children that go to kindergarten ready to read are more successful than those children that go without those 6 skills that they need. Children need to be reading on grade level, from the time, first grade on, as far as I'm concerned. We know that if they aren't by 3rd grade, the chances of us losing them and not having them complete high school is pretty high. It's almost a 1-to-1 correlation. So we want to make sure the kids are ready to read. And we have a lot of programs. One of them gives books away. But we really want kids to be able to get on the internet and see things like Tumble books and Scholastic books, where the book is actually read to them and the words light up. So they're learning to read in a fun way. My granddaughter is 3 now, but she's been recognizing letters for a long time because as a librarian, I'm sure she came out of the womb when we were handing her a book. But she loves book flicks because of Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, which was written by a Kansan. But our kids, if we give them the opportunity, will learn to love to read. And then they will become lifelong learners. And that's what we really want for them. We also have downloadable ebooks at no charge for you to use and to enjoy. But broadband's necessary for every single one of these things. The things I want to make sure you remembered, there's no charge for anything at your public library, right? And all of these services are available at no charge. I should go back first again to the mobile hotspots. The thing we've heard from people about the hotspots is no charge for that, but we discovered we had to charge people if they didn't return them on time because people were keeping them, they didn't want to give them back. We only wanted them to have it for a week. So, no charge sometimes has a downside to it. Remember, staff expertise at the library, librarians love to help. Some resources are only going to be available at your library. Librarians are very committed to privacy and security, and we need more broadband at our public libraries. there's anybody, you're all providers, most of you are providers, so I leave you with that. If you've got questions, there's my contact information, and I guess we're gonna take questions now.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Go ahead. Hey, before, so I am happy to take questions. Looks like people have lots. I'm gonna move my chair kind of around up here. So we will take questions right away from the audience. I've got some, so if you run out, explore some more. Go ahead.
Sure.
And you can say who you are and where you're from.
Okay, my name's Maggie Baskell. I work for Nextech, a broadband provider in northwest and central Kansas. And I guess my question is regarding utilizing the 4G signal for those devices. And you had mentioned you use Sprint and you partnered with Verizon. But I'm wondering still how many homes are you running into that still don't have adequate cell phone coverage to be able to make that work?
Well, it's not, it's actually, none of ours are, all of ours are working. We haven't had any complaints at all.
That's great.
But we have just the two, Newton and Salina, that are Sprint. And then we knew the Sprint network could not support the, all of the libraries. So we went to Verizon. We're being very careful. In particular, Effingham has some problems with the Verizon wireless, but we haven't had any issues at all. So we haven't had any households. And by the way, we did talk to you about partnering with us in this. So if you're interested, we really are still.
Yes, I actually sat at a table with Northwest Kansas Library Systems, so we did have a little talk, yeah.
Good, good.
I might mention that we're doing this a little differently, and that we actually sell for $40 the not just the hotspots, but also the larger hubs, which you can actually plug a computer into. You don't need wireless for that. And those belong to the people who get them from us. And so, and then we will help them if they have a bank card to sign up for a $1 a month plan. But if they don't have a bank card, because many of our low-income people don't have bank accounts, we're actually set up to collect cash from them. So, you know, this is sort of gets into the culture element of the digital divide, you know. It's like it's really easy for most of us to whip out a credit card and sign up. It's not so easy for the majority of the people that we work with. So we're actually the first, you might say, franchise like this for everyone on a mobile beacon in the country. One other part of this is that now Sprint is going to be converting all of 4G to LTE. And when that happens, this is going to be a 25 megabit connection.
Right, and just to add to that, Michael, so for our purposes, for the mobile beacon product and system, you go on clear.com/coverage and you see the map of the United States. It's a green map, but there's some holes that are white, right, where we don't have coverage. As Michael said, when Sprint switches, they're going to decommission the WiMAX towers and switch to LTE, which is much faster, even more reliable, but then we'll have coverage border to border throughout the United States. So the pockets that we don't cover now will all change when that switch happens, which there's rumors leaked saying November of 2015, that's going to happen. So the good news is more coverage, faster speed is on the way. I think if I may just bring to attention, I think what Michael is doing is so important because he just doesn't give stuff to people, like, you know, he teaches people how to fish, right? So that's the important thing. And we serve many low-income Americans throughout the United States, and they are very mobile. They move from place to place. So the wireless solution, I know fiber is great, and I agree, fiber, nothing's better than fiber. But for this particular sect of the digital divide, they move around a lot. So having a wireless device is really key, I think, in many ways. And also, just sitting next to our customer service folks, I hear about, you know, credit cards that are denied and no forms of payment and things like that. And so I think having a community partner like the librarians and like what Michael's doing and a number of other nonprofits here in Kansas are essential to keep these types of programs going, and they make them much more sustainable as well.
What kind of, Michael, what kind of,
Your name?
oh, Angela.
Rob.
I'm with the TCT and Council Program. What kind of criteria do you have for computers that are donated to you? They have to be a certain age, certain...
So actually, we'll take anything. We find out that if we put a bunch of requirements, then people go, oh, mine's not good enough. So we take anything. But truth is, especially from the public, probably about 75% of that stuff does go up. And that's when I say we're cleaners, like, so we have to clean through the stuff that's given to us to find good stuff. But we also have a program where we're offering these same desktops to nonprofits for just $100 a piece. And we can do this because we're part of a Microsoft grant program called the Citizenship License, where we can actually buy a fully registered copy of Windows 7 Pro for $6 to put on these machines. And Microsoft Office 2010 Home Student is also $6. So, I mean, one of the biggest cost barriers for loading computers, of course, is the operating system. So if we can produce a computer with Office on it for $12 of software, that's how we can make a $75 computer. But what's going out, from our perspective, is a computer that's very decent. You know, we maybe get only less than 10 computers a year that comes back to us because there's problems. And we've put out over 1,000 last year. And the way we do that is we have guys like Rick who are very careful. And right now, the bottom line of our computers for desktops is a Core 2 computer, which is a very fast computer, 80 meg hard drive, 2 meg of RAM. So we're trying to, or 80 gig hard drive. So we're trying to produce something that is so good that it's not going to come back to us.
For Joe and Allison,
Can you say who you are?
I'm Sean, Wheatland Broadband. If you're interested in working with you guys in your service, how does that work? Because I realize that both of you kind of indicated you work with certain organizations or whatever. But if you're with an organization that's interested in bringing that type of service to your footprint, just simply, I mean, do we just contact you and get that information from you? Okay, very good.
Yeah, getting back to the computers and the technology, one of the difficulties with the older computers is they tend to get slow after a while. Once you put on a version of Windows and a version of Office, what is the satisfaction, say 6 months down the road, of the people who get the computers?
And your name is who you're with?
I'm sorry, I'm Daryl Fincher. I'm with I'm in Oklahoma, state government. But when they get the computers, I've read some research studies where there has been dissatisfaction for a number of reasons. How do yours hold up with that?
Yeah, well, ultimately, as I said before, we get very few back for mechanical reasons. And we have, you know, desktop technology especially hasn't changed that much. So Windows 7 with 4 gig of memory, I mean, you're going to have that computer for a long time. Additionally, though, I think probably the biggest issue that comes back is people have virus issues. And so we do put an antivirus on all these computers. And we teach people how to be careful about what they do on the internet. And we tell them that, you know, our servicing for that is basically you can bring it back to us, and for $20 we'll reset it to what it was like when we gave it to you. So I think, you know, that's probably the biggest issue. But as far as the actual product that we're putting out there, you know, it's going to last people for years.
I was wondering, you have the hotspots, you send them home with your children so that they have access to the computer, right?
Yes.
Now, then what sort of filter do you have on there to keep them maybe from accessing things that we wish they wouldn't?
Yes, that's a good point, especially if you get E-rate money.
Yes, is that,
Yes.
And your name?
oh, I'm sorry, I'm Jan Scoggins from Dodge City.
So I'm thinking of one particular school district in California. It has worked it not from the device or from our technology standpoint, but from the device itself, from the Chromebook itself. They're able to read.
So that's where the filter is
Yes,
in.
yes.
What they-
Which is, I think we've found collectively, us and the school district find that that's the cleanest model to do that. Because we don't track usage, we don't want to track this, and that's why we respect libraries. We have the same mindset as libraries. We don't want to know what you're doing with it, and once you have the device, it's all yours,
And
right?
I agree totally, and I'm really tough on this. I think the best filter you're ever gonna have is your parent. And the parents need to be involved. It's not just a thing you hand over to a kid and that's the end of it. It's a great tool, but I don't think that we can expect technology to take the place of.
Many of our people in our population, our demographics, the parents may not comprehend that importance of that.
But that's part of the digital literacy. I believe that we are obligated as librarians to explain that to people. And we're not imposing it on them, we're explaining it and educating them.
Just a quick clarification, I'm also the state E-rate coordinator. On E-rate funds, unless it's transported over an E-rateable connection, the filtering requirements by E-rate don't apply, which means that as a school district, you have the opportunity to make your own decisions. And also, I've done extensive research on E-rate requirements. First, they're very minimal, hardly anybody will run into them. Secondly, the only way they can ding you for them is by not having them, because to determine that you violated them requires them to take you to court. You know, they actually say that in some of the regulations in the countries.
I'm Gina Millsap. I'm the CEO of the Topeka County Public Library. And Joe is my state librarian, and I'm her librarian. That's right. One of the things, this is an observation, because I've heard the partnering with housing authorities mentioned several times. We partner with our housing authority and our rescue mission as well, which is very active in the community. And one of the really great outcomes we're seeing as we deploy not just the physical access, but the digital literacy component, and is that it's not just this, but it's one of the critical factors in helping stabilize neighborhoods. So that neighborhoods that were high substance abuse rates, high crime rates, neighbors don't know each other, you know, they're floating in and out of homelessness. Getting this kind of infrastructure in place, just like running water and electricity, can have an enormous stabilizing influence on those neighborhoods.
We had an example of one of the Section 8 properties that we worked with called Rosedale Ridge, 168 families live there. And they actually spend almost all the time with about 78% occupancy, 75%. After we put the Wi-Fi in there, they love the videos because it really attracted people to that particular property because there was access, and it meant, like you said, more stability, people getting more engaged, kind of a community building opportunity.
Do you have, Michael, as you've developed your program over the last few years, you've obviously talked with partners all over the country, you were at the Shelby Conference last year, from a program standpoint and also from sort of demographic standpoint, have you seen any difference in rural areas versus urban areas?
Not really, except that more people live in the urban areas. But actually, you know, it's interesting because I was for many years part of an association of homeless shelters, the rescue mission, when I got to know very well. And you have some of the same poverty dynamics in both the rural and the urban areas. And in the same sense, I really think the area of transformational power of accessible technology applies just as much. That you can uplift people who are low income by providing this sort of resource.
Other questions?
I've worked on a digital divide issue for Broward County School Districts a long time ago, and one of the big things there is the use English second language. Do you offer ESL training so people aren't here?
Right now, we're actually partnering with Spanish Economic Development Corporation in Kansas City, and then we'll open another center recently with the group called Avenue of Life that is so we're working with them, and another one of our partners is the University of Kansas City, and they actually specialize in just adult literacy period, and that's been a great partnership.
You guys talked, you mentioned the Microsoft license costs and how you get a discount on that, but in general, if there are communities that want to start incorporating these kind of programs, what are the costs you need to be thinking about from a, not just a hardware standpoint or how much a hotspot costs, but even the program support that you need to actually execute these things and to do all sort of the wraparound pieces to make it successful? How much, what kind of investment are you looking at? probably for all of you, because you all have different.
Well, for just an example, we say we put out 1,000 computers last year, and really we did that with a staff and a half and many volunteers. It's interesting because in some ways I like to tell people we've kind of become this lightning rod for socially minded geeks and hackers. That you have probably in your community too, people that are really, technically astute, but would like to do something for the community. But they're not the guys that would go down and, give out soup at the rescue mission, right? And so in some ways, this whole area of the digital divide is a social justice issue, and we like to call it community technology, because it allows people with those particular skills to give back to the community. So that's a big thing. We also did all this training last year, and really only had about a half-time trainer. All of that was volunteers. So it's not like you need a huge infrastructure. If you have the passion and the people that have that opportunity.
We're a state agency, but really the way that this program, Landing the Internet, happened was really because of relationship building across the country, having connection to New York Public Library. And I have a staff member who is devoted to just statewide resources. A catalog that allows us to share books and material. Also, the database, maintaining the database subscriptions and access. So, really, two people.
Yeah, to just echo, I think that it stems mostly from partnerships. I can't put a dollar figure on it, but all the successful models I've seen throughout the country, it starts somewhere, whether it's a housing authority or a library or a school or some community anchor institution, and then partnerships bringing in the volunteers, the training, the connection, the devices, whether it's Google or in Providence, maybe GTEC, someone's donating devices. So I think it's more, I look at it more as the partnerships.
How much do your devices cost for your hotspot?
These are any device, the hub, stick, or the hotspot is $39. You buy it, you own it, and then $10.
Joe, do you have any metrics as far as like how big your program should be to sort of meet the need? Like, relative to population density, it'd be great if we had this many devices or this many stations.
Well, we only have those 19 libraries, and I think we have 6 at one of our largest libraries, and I bet you they could have double that. I think our little libraries, the more rural the community and the more impoverished, the higher the number you would need. So we could probably have 100 times as many as we do now, and maybe we meeting the needs of folks. Now, not everybody's going to have one at the time that they need it either. It's not like we're going to give these away free to everybody in the community.
I'd like to mention one more thing about our permission operations is that, we supported half of a $100,000 budget last year with the sale of equipment and other types of IT services. So it's really a social enterprise. The rest of our money is going pretty much to grants and
I'm Marianne.
I should say one more thing. We are not going to be expanding this program. Once the Knight Foundation grant is over, we do not sustain programs like this. We create the pilot, see if it's successful, and then the sustaining has to be done by the local community. We're not interested in long-term programs.
I'm Marianne. I work with the New Public Library Board, one of the first to try it. We had 9 devices along with 9 mini iPads that the state library gave us, and we immediately had waiting lists on every one of our devices the whole way through. And even now, January, and the staff, all of them came and told me we have to continue this. So we're trying to work. I want to talk to Allison as soon as I'm over this. See if I'll
And I think maybe one thing to just remember is that we don't need to convince people this is important. I think, if you look at the demographics that I shared with my PowerPoint, these are the people that the Pew Research Center says aren't on board. Well, it's not that they don't want to be. it's doing things to make sure that they can get.
Last question for me. Any other questions out here? So a lot of the work that you do in Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas, relies on infrastructure that's already in place. And so if you look at the state broadband maps, just in terms of like, who has 3 megs of access, Kansas City's pretty well covered. And so that's sort of underlies your work. You talked about, I'm glad that you asked about, talked about Sprint and Verizon. That are my questions. But what do you think needs to be done in terms of, and you guys may not have visibility to this, but in terms of the infrastructure, the underlying infrastructure to support the things that you're talking about throughout Kansas?
You know, I've only been in Kansas 5 years now, but I think that we definitely need the fiber. Laying the fiber needs to happen. I don't know whose responsibility that should be. I just know that that's what we need, and we need real broadband up and down. We can't just be saying, well, you know, it's enough, it's good enough. Folks don't know what they need until they have it. It's one of those things, you know, you think you've got enough broadband until you get more broadband, and then you say, now I know what I've been missing. We know what broadband they need, I think, as a group, and we just need to get it done instead of keep talking about it.
And I really think
I know you said one more. You were the last one. This conversation just prompts me to make sure we're all on the same page, that when we talk about leaving communities behind, we run the risk of really leaving poor people behind in ways that slavery and Jim Crow and the Industrial Revolution did not. And so it almost begs the question, should we have a conversation about broadband being part of the utility structure in America and not just an add-on or this piece that we do in the library or this piece that we add here, that it becomes a fundamental part of how we live?
Do you want to introduce yourself? Who wants to follow up with you?
I'm Bernard Franklin. I'm with Kansas State University.
And I really think the city of Chinook really is leading the way. I think every city in Kansas, now especially with the initiative that's coming from the president and the FCC, it provides an awesome opportunity to say, as taxpayers, as citizens, as voters, as politicians, let's make this a priority. Let's make this something that happens where we live.
Well, of course, we're in a state where they tried to pass a law last year to make that illegal, and that law's going to be put forward again this year, so we do have some issues.
So I think we have to be vigilant. I think you're absolutely right. I think if we do want that dream, we've got to make sure that there's nothing put in place that's going to block that dream.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists. Please give a big hand.